Hello there everybody, it is me XfreezerBunny and welcome back to another Sims 4 speed build. So today we are doing a little bit of a different build from what we normally do on the channel. Today's build is more of an asset build that turned into a room build. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a second, but this isn't necessarily the conventional house build that you are probably used to on the channel, but I wanted to try something different. And this build is dedicated to Chinese New Year. So this is the Chinese Pavilion that is inspired by Chinese culture in celebration of Chinese New Year that took place earlier this month. So in case you didn't know, I actually went to a Chinese school for grade school, so I spent 8 years at a Chinese school. For the record, I can't speak Chinese fluently. I do understand a little bit of it and I know how to write as well, but I was exposed to the Chinese New Year celebrations as well as the cultural festivals growing up for 8 years, and this just made me so nostalgic because I also have Chinese relatives that I haven't seen in years, and this just reminded me so much of them, so I wanted to share a little bit of that with you guys by doing this Chinese Pavilion build. Now, like I said earlier, this is more of an asset build because I have a couple of ideas for Chinese inspired houses, but this isn't exactly a proper house. This is more of a room build just to show you guys the different assets that I'm most likely going to be using in future builds. And the reason why I'm doing that is for practical purposes because I don't want to have to like refilm everything every time I do a new build, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be reusing a lot of these assets in my future builds. So whenever people ask me about those in future builds, I can just redirect them to this video and it'll all be fine and handy and dandy. And this is also a thing that I like to do a lot in The Sims 4. I've been doing this for years now where I just, make random assets. I call them prefab assets, by the way. Should we make that a thing? Yeah, asset builds or prefab assets. Let me know if you have a better way to call them. But yeah, I like doing these to add a little bit more variety when it comes to the furniture in game. And thankfully, we now have the tool mod to give us even more placement options for items, because these things would never have been possible if it wasn't for the tool mod. So if you remember, in my two recent builds, I did functional stoves, and that kind of carried on over to this build where I'm also making functional items. I'm going to be making functional Chinese beds, also inspired by Chinese culture and Chinese history. You'll see that in just a little bit, but just to make this into a proper speed build, I also made some architectural elements as well. And the first thing that we're actually working on right now is arguably the most elaborate prefabricated thing I've ever done, and it is this beautiful round wooden archway / wooden partition. I don't actually know what these are called, but you can see this all the time in travel brochures or even like interior design brochures about Chinese architecture. And for this particular detail, I was really inspired by the architecture of Suzhou, which is a place that's more famous for its classical gardens, but I'm also fascinated by the architecture of the villas of Suzhou, and I did a lot of research on that. I remember watching documentaries on that many years ago, so I had to rewatch a lot of those documentaries, and it is so beautiful. I definitely want to make like a Suzhou inspired garden at some point. I've also done my fair share of traveling around Asia and Southeast Asia as well. I went to Hong Kong, and 2 years ago, just before the pandemic, I went to Singapore and Taiwan, where I saw a lot of architecture like this as well. And you can bet I'm going to be making builds inspired by those places as well. I've always wanted to make builds inspired by my travels, but I didn't really have much of an opportunity to make those. So hopefully, now that I've done this, I can have a little bit more motivation to do those kinds of builds as well. But yeah, over the past couple of weeks, there have been some really exciting announcements from The Sims 4. We have the update that gave us some new cast items for Black History Month, which is pretty cool. I love it. And we also got the announcement for the new game pack, My Wedding Stories. Or is it My Marriage Stories? I don't know, I keep forgetting. But yeah, something like that. I'm so excited. This has the potential of becoming possibly my favorite game pack, just based on what I've seen so far. and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Haven't actually read that much about the new pack yet because I also don't want to be spoiled, because that's just how I like to enjoy the game. So yeah, really excited to check that out for myself. I saw that there was gonna be like an Asian themed wedding in the trailer, so I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to see more of the traditional outfits as well, because I feel like that was really lacking. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, EA did announce that they were going to be releasing multiple contents over the past couple of weeks and months. And one thing that I was totally expecting was more of like a Chinese New Year inspired announcement for new items that they were going to patch in, which unfortunately didn't actually push through. Yeah, I was totally expecting them to make like an announcement of like, you know, maybe new Chinese foods or maybe new Chinese furniture to be patched in game, but that didn't quite happen. But that's fine because I'm doing this build, so yeah, you know, EA, if you want some help with some content suggestions, just, you know, hook me up. You know where to find me. Anyway, moving on to the bed. Now for this build, I am making two types of bed. This one is the more elaborate one, and this one is going to be kind of like the source for the other bed, because the other bed is kind of like a more simpler version of this, but this one is a traditional Chinese shelf bed. I believe that's what they call it in China. But it's basically a 4-poster canopy bed that you can see all over, you know, China and all these traditional houses, even modern houses. Actually, I've seen Chinese people that live in modern kind of like, you know, futuristic or like Western houses that have like a bed like this, and it's really interesting actually, the fact that they kind of like maintain that kind of tradition. It's really interesting. But yeah, I figured that I can use these wooden pieces from cottage living to make these elaborate like wooden furniture. So I am, yeah, using the tool mod to be able to make this, and this is really awesome. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and it's fully functional as well. So for this bed in particular, you will need to have cottage living and also eco lifestyle as well if you want that bed. But as far as I know, you can put whatever bed you want to inside of this frame and it'll still work. I think the outdoor living bed would look really good on this as well if you want a more, you know, like not destroyed bed, because this one has tears in it, the one that came with eco lifestyle. So if you're not into that aesthetic, you might want to go for the outdoor retreat one. But the only thing I'm not a big fan of in the outdoor retreat bed is that it has very limited swatches. So yeah, and honestly the colors on those beds are kind of, yeah, way too over the top for my liking, so I did go for this bed instead. So yeah, this bed is pretty elaborate. It's also really expensive as well. I think it's like 4,000 simoleons or something like that, maybe even more actually. So it's a pretty pricey piece of furniture, but you know, I think it's also a really nice statement piece as well. It definitely catches your attention. So yeah, just a little side note here. As I was building this, I actually rewatched one of my favorite Chinese movies of all time. It's called Raise the Red Lantern. It came out in the 1990s, starring the amazing, the legendary Gong Li. I believe that's one of the movies that really propelled her to superstardom. And if you guys have not seen Raise the Red Lantern, please watch it. It's more of like an artsy film that takes place in this traditional Chinese household. Very cultural because it's set in the 1920s, and it really tells you a lot about, you know, the status of women during that time, and you know, all of the politics that goes into running the household. It actually feels more of like a thriller and a mystery, kind of, not mystery, but more of like a psychological thriller, I would say. And yeah, the film is so good. I remember watching it way back in college for my architectural history class, because I took up history of Asian architecture in college. So I remember watching that, and I think this is like my third time watching it since then actually. So thank you to my architectural history professor for making us watch that, because that's such a good movie that I don't think I would ever have discovered if it wasn't for that, history of Asian architecture course that I took way back. But yeah, this is the more simpler bed. This is, I believe, called an R-hat bed. It looks like a couch actually, and it does actually serve as a couch as well as a bed. And you can also often see that there is another little table on top of this little couch, so that when they're entertaining guests, they can like play board games or like have some tea or stuff like that. So yeah, the two beds that we just made also have smaller versions of them as well. They had like single versions of them as well, which I didn't film me making them because I was literally just deleting parts of the bed, and it's not really worth the time to show you guys, but it's pretty straightforward anyway. So here I am just saving them on the gallery. All of these will be available individually on the gallery, but I think I'm also going to upload the room that we're going to be making as well on the gallery, so you can find all of the details to download that in the description of this video. By the way, now that I've done this, I'm still not opposed to having like a proper Chinese patch, or maybe even like a proper pack to celebrate Chinese culture. That would be pretty cool. I feel like there's still a lot of aspects of Asian architecture that wasn't really tackled in the Snowy Escape pack, so maybe having like a Chinese or like a Korean pack would be nice, or maybe even a Southeast Asian pack. Maybe I'm biased because I'm Southeast Asian, but I would love to see like a proper Southeast Asian pack. But yeah, here I am just using all of the items that we built to, put together this little room for the screenshots that I'm going to be showing you towards the end of this video. Also to give you an idea on how to use these items. Basically, the items are meant to be modular. That's why I tried to be very precise when I was building them, because I wanted them to be able to link up properly without any glitching if you put them together like next to each other basically. So all of them are meant to be modular, and the beds are both functional if you put like actual mattresses in them, but they also look good as decorative pieces as well. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it all came together. This room, by the way, was inspired by the second wife room in Raise the Red Lantern, just so you know. I did change the yellow wallpaper that I used here because I feel like it didn't really show the items properly. I feel like it didn't really show the detail properly, but yeah, this whole vibe kind of reminds me of Crazy Rich Asians, by the way, which if you haven't seen Crazy Rich Asians, I highly suggest you check it out. I feel like Crazy Rich Asians is more of like an accessible little movie for those who aren't really familiar with Asian culture. Sorry, I just got a text there. Unprofessional much, but yeah, I highly suggest you check it out if you haven't seen it yet. It's so good, and it takes place in Singapore, which is really awesome because I don't really see a lot of movies take place in Southeast Asia actually, now that I think about it. But yeah, just putting in the finishing touches for this build, and I think that's actually pretty much it. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Like I said, all of the downloads for everything that we built in this video will be linked in the description below. You can also find it in my gallery. My username is also in the description. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. You all have an awesome day. Enjoy the rest of the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.